Ocilla, Georgia, 2005. A single blue latex glove lies on a manicured lawn. A house is locked from the inside, the alarm system silent. A woman is gone. For 11 years, the files collect dust in a GBI drawer, a cold case that became a ghost story. Then, a man with a microphone starts asking questions. He isn't a detective. He isn't a private investigator. He is a filmmaker with a hobby. Suddenly, the silence of a decade breaks. A phone rings. A tip leads to a sun-drenched pecan orchard. A confession follows. The state had the evidence for a decade, but they needed a stranger to speak it into a microphone before they would finally make an arrest. The silence is over, but the noise is just beginning. Tara Grinstead was the pride of Ocilla. A high school history teacher, a former Miss Tifton, a woman who seemed to have no enemies. On October 22, 2005, she attends a beauty pageant, goes to a friend's barbecue, and then vanishes into the humid Georgia night. Monday morning, her car is in the driveway. Her cell phone is charging on the nightstand. Her clothes are laid out for the coming school day. But Tara is nowhere to be found. The GBI takes over the scene. They find that single latex glove outside her home, containing the DNA of an unidentified male. They interview hundreds. They scrutinize the ex-boyfriend, the fellow teacher, the obsessed students. The trail goes cold for 11 long years. The town moves on, or tries to, but the mystery of Tara Grinstead becomes a weight that Ocilla carries in secret. Enter Payne Lindsay. He is not a journalist by trade. He is a guy looking for a story. He starts a podcast called Up and Vanished. He walks the streets of Ocilla, knocking on doors that have stayed shut for a decade. He talks to the outcasts and the overlooked. He creates a feedback loop where every new episode puts fresh pressure on the local residents. Every download is a reminder that the world is watching. Secrets in small towns are like air bubbles in a submerged car. Eventually, they have to surface. Stories like this one almost never see the light of day. If you want more buried history, subscribe to Crime and Century. We dig up what others leave behind. In February 2017, the pressure becomes unbearable for those who knew the truth. The GBI holds a press conference. They have a suspect, Ryan Duke, a former student at the school where Tara taught. Then comes Bo Dukes. They describe a horrific night, a botched robbery, and a body burned in a pecan orchard. The podcast did not just tell a story, it broke a wall of silence that had protected killers for nearly 12 years. Across the world, in Sydney, Australia, another cold case was rotting in the sun. 1982, Lynette Dawson, a devoted mother, vanishes from her home on the northern beaches. Her husband, Chris Dawson, a star rugby player and teacher, claims she ran away to join a religious cult. He moves his teenage lover into the family home just days after his wife disappears. For decades, the Australian police do nothing. There is no body, they say. There is no case. But in 2018, journalist Hedley Thomas releases the teacher's pet. He doesn't just report, he excavates. He finds witnesses who were never interviewed by the original detectives. He uncovers the toxic culture of the school where Chris taught. He finds the girls who were groomed and the neighbors who heard the screams and the arguments. The podcast becomes a global sensation with 60 million downloads. The pressure on the New South Wales police becomes a crushing weight. They realize the world is watching their previous incompetence in real time. They re-examine the file. They look at the evidence with fresh, shamed eyes. In 2022, 40 years after Lynette disappeared, Chris Dawson is finally found guilty of murder. This is the new frontier of justice. It is not just about digital footprints or DNA, it is about narrative pressure. Consider the case of Curtis Flowers in Winona, Mississippi. He was tried 6 times for the same quadruple murder. 6 times. The prosecutor, Doug Evans, spent decades trying to put him on death row despite evidence that was crumbling under the slightest touch. The podcast In the Dark spent a year on the ground in Winona. They didn't just talk, they crunched data. They analyzed every single strike in the jury selection process over 20 years. They proved a pattern of racial bias that the American courts had ignored for 2 decades. Their investigation did not just win an award, it went to the Supreme Court. The conviction was overturned. Curtis Flowers walked out of prison a free man because a team of reporters refused to accept the official version of the truth. These podcasts are not just entertainment for your morning commute. They are decentralized cold case units. They crowdsource leads. They keep victims' names in the algorithm until the law has no choice but to listen. They turn listeners into investigators and silence into a liability for the guilty. The power of the microphone is terrifying because it bypasses the bureaucracy. It ignores the statute of limitations on public interest. In the case of Adnan Syed, the podcast serial did not just launch the true crime craze. It highlighted the fatal flaws in a conviction that had stood for 15 years. It took years of legal battles following the podcast, but eventually, the DNA evidence, tested because of the renewed global scrutiny, pointed away from Adnan. He walked free in 2022. But there is a dark side to this digital vigilantism. When thousands of amateur sleuths descend on a cold case, innocent people can be caught in the crossfire. Lives are ruined by Reddit threads and speculative episodes that lean too hard into theory and not enough into fact. Yet, the results are undeniable. From the pecan orchards of Georgia to the courtrooms of Mississippi, the record of history is being corrected in real time. The voices of the dead are being amplified by the living, broadcast through headphones into the ears of millions who refuse to let a case go cold. We are living in an era where a suburban bedroom can become a precinct and a smartphone can become a subpoena. The walls of silence are thinner than they have ever been. The truth is no longer what the authorities tell us, it is what we find when we refuse to stop looking. The microphone stays open even when the courtroom closes. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to know the truth. And leave a comment. Which detail hit you hardest? The microphone is always on, and history is finally starting to listen.